everyone. Today I'm going to go over the next module in the cognition unit. Let's start with algorithms. So algorithms are methodical methods, procedures, or rules that we can follow in order to solve a problem. Whereas heuristics are more like shortcuts. And they both have their pros and cons. So for example, if you're in a grocery store looking for an item, an algorithm would be to search every aisle, which would take a while, but it would ensure that if the item is in the store, you will find it. Whereas a heuristic would be, okay, let's think about what this item is, what category it might be in, and like go directly to the different aisles that you think it's most likely to be in. And that is more quick, short, and efficient, but you could miss it if you didn't choose the right aisle to go to. Or if you're trying to like figure out another word that like uses all the same letters as a word, an algorithm would be like putting each letter in each of the positions, which would leave you like with so many combinations, whereas a heuristic would be like, okay, which letters typically go together and which ones don't typically go together, and kind of just like figure it out. A shortcut. So yeah, those are useful in their different ways. We use heuristics a lot, but algorithms are helpful when you need to do something without a shortcut to get the right answer. Insight is that sudden realization. So while you're solving the problem, thinking about it, your frontal lobes are active, and then they've actually measured that aha moment is there's a burst of activity in like the right temporal lobe. Confirmation bias. So we're talking about like problem solving. So confirmation bias is when you kind of like search for evidence that supports your ideas, and when you come across evidence that rejects your ideas, you kind of distort that or ignore it, just kind of say, oh, it's not valid, don't pay attention. So that can be a impediment to like problem solving, because you're just only seeing your point of view. Fixation is similar. It's when you can only see like one perspective. So you have a very strong opinion that like gun control does or does not save lives. You have a very strong opinion that like vaccines do or do not cause autism, and you're not willing to see it a different way. Mental set. Mental set is a type of fixation. And it's just like when you keep approaching a problem in a way that has like worked in the past. And this is actually a good thing most of the time, because if something you did in the past worked, you're basically just learning from that and using that approach again. But the reason it's under fixation is because it can get to the point where you cannot see any other ways to solve the problem or approach the problem, and then you get stuck. So there's an example of how do you use 4 sticks to make how do you use 6 sticks to make 4 equilateral triangles? If you want to pause the video, you can try and figure it out. So it's 6 sticks to make 4 equilateral triangles. So the reason, if you did pause the video and try and think about it, maybe you got it, maybe you didn't. If you didn't, it's likely because you were thinking in 2 dimensions and you couldn't figure out how to approach the problem in a different way. And you were approaching it in 2 dimensions because of your mental set, and that's a type of fixation. And that's a type of fixation where you approach a problem in a way that worked in the past. So if 2 dimensions normally works, your brain just forgot to realize that you could bring it into 3 dimensions and make a little pyramid so that you have, 4 triangles. So you put like the 3 sticks on the bottom, and then the 3 sticks going up to like form a 3D pyramid. Next is a section about like judgments and decisions. So, our intuition is kind of like our unconscious mind. So, it's an effortless and immediate, kind of like automatic response to something. And it's very useful. It keeps us safe. It's our, like, we learn so much unconsciously. We can't process that information, like, really. So, our intuition kind of just does that for us. Like, from what we've learned in the past, through past experiences, our intuition kind of like kicks in and helps us navigate the world, make decisions on the fly. But it can be like a negative thing because like sometimes really smart people could just make really dumb decisions, and you know sometimes that's due to intuition. So what a representative heuristic is is like, sorry, this is related to intuition, but it's like a representative heuristic. It's like when you prototype, you have a prototype that you kind of like associate with, and you ignore other relevant factors. So it falls under the category of like intuition because it's like part of intuition. It makes it's a reason like why our intuitions could sometimes be incorrect, is because of this representative heuristic. So, if you imagine somebody who is short, slim, and likes to read poetry, are they more likely to be an English professor at an Ivy League or a truck driver? So, a lot of people will say they're more likely to be an English professor at an Ivy League school because it fits the prototype of what that professor is going to be like so much better than the prototype of a truck driver. But you kind of fail to realize that truck drivers are 7,000 times more common than Ivy League English professors. Um, so even if the description is 50 times more typical of an Ivy League English professor, this poetry reader is still more likely to be a truck driver. So that's kind of the idea here. You ignore relevant information. Um, you just kind of go with your prototype. This can also contribute to racism. If you have like a prototype of like delinquent like black teens, then you can kind of just like ignore who this who if you meet someone who's like a black teen, you might just ignore what kind of person they are and like assume based on your prototype. And that's kind of like your intuition leading you astray. Next is availability heuristic. So that's when um, you're readily, your brain kind of like uses readily available information. So whatever is like fresh in your memory or whatever is like really vivid like images that like stuck in your head. Yeah. So this can sometimes lead to like false, like over exaggerated fears. Let's just say like after 9/11, people were really scared of flying, even though the risk of driving was so much higher than the risk of flying. And that was because it was like on the news. It was everywhere. So like they were thinking about it. Also it's like more uncommon and like, you know, like whoa, so like it's stuck in their memories, like really scary. Um yeah, even if like a certain terrorist group were to kill like 1,000 people, like people would be like super afraid. But why is that fear so much stronger than like the fear of like suicides? Like those are a lot more common. So we kind of like fear the wrong things sometimes. Um, and this also contributes to like misconceptions about global warming. So after like very hot days, people are like, oh my gosh, global warming is real. Like, we gotta get on this. But then when, like, the temperature gets cold again, people are like, oh, like, it's fine. I mean, it's not really that bad. But this is kind of the availability heuristic because the most recent weather plays into our perception of climate change, which isn't about like what the weather was recently. It's more of like an overall trend. And so we kind of ignore the science and just go with, oh, well, today was cold, so we're fine. Um, Overconfidence is when we think that our own judgments are more accurate than they actually are. So this is actually more common in people who don't know that much about what they're talking about. So if somebody is super like definite on something, it could mean that they actually don't really know what they're talking about, which is interesting that like the less somebody knows, the more definite they could be in their opinion. As you start to like ask them like more like follow-up questions and like for evidence and stuff, they kind of don't know and they become more like moderate on their opinions. Um but yeah, overconfidence, like, very common, but it's also an important thing for like self-confidence. Um People who are overconfident, it can be a good thing. They can be more like competitive and social and stuff. So it's not all terrible. Um, Belief perseverance. So this is when even after evidence has come out that like opposes your views and just like, you know, your views aren't really quite valid anymore, you still kind of cling on to them. Um, it's kind of like similar to the confirmation bias. Um, so, like, one way to help people is, yeah, they did this experiment, kind of interesting, where they had like people read different articles that like they like told them, oh, like, yeah, this new findings came out about such and such topic, and these people they chose have like strong opinions one way or the other, and they have them read like um articles about like these new findings that came out, and they would actually like they read like one article supporting it, one article like refuting it, and the people would be more confident in their own views after reading like both the articles. They would be like more certain about their side. They're like more impressed by the studies that like supported their views, and the ones that didn't, they were just like whatever. So they were kind of like drawn more apart by reading information on both sides, which is interesting. Um so reading like things and evidence from the opposite side doesn't always help get rid of like a bias, but if you ask the person to like consider how they would think about it if the opposite results came out, like if you have them read it and then you're like, well, what if it was like the opposite, that can kind of help a little bit better. And lastly, framing. So the way something is like kind of like the wording thing for like surveys. So like if you say like enhanced interrogation versus like torture, people have a different reaction. If you say to somebody, okay, this surgery, 10% of people die, versus this surgery, 90% of people survive, they're going to have a very different reaction to whether they feel like safe doing the surgery or not, which is interesting because it's the same exact information, it's just worded differently.